Good Wednesday. Want to speak to you today from a passage from 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 1 through 7. It's also recorded in 1 Chronicles 13, verses 9 through 12. And it's just one of the stories about moving the Ark of the Covenant. And I put this question, are you bothered by Uzzah's death? And you may be familiar with the story of Uzzah, a priest, and the moving of the Ark of the Covenant. Uh, in the story, again found in two places, the Ark was being transported upon a cart. And as it was being pulled along by some oxen, the oxen stumbled and the Ark wobbled on the cart as though it was going to fall off. And as it did, Uzzah reached out and touched the Ark to steady it. But when he did this, the scripture says that the anger of the Lord burned against Uzzah, and God struck him down there for irreverence, and he died there by the Ark of God. At first reading, a person is floored thinking about this, thinking something like, gosh, it wasn't that bad, was it? Uzzah was just trying to help keep the ark from falling off of the cart. Why would God kill him for trying to help steady the ark? I think when we read this, we've all at first asked this question. Well, wow, that's kind of severe, isn't it? Well, yeah, it is severe. But let's take a look at why this happened. What caused God to be so angry with Uzzah that he would kill him for trying to help to keep the ark from falling to the ground? First of all, God had given specific instructions on how to move the Ark of the Covenant. God gave Moses the instructions on how to move the ark, and we see that in chapter 25 of Exodus, where we read in the 25th chapter, verses 12 through 14, "Now you shall cast 4 gold rings for it," that is the Ark of the Covenant, "and fasten them on its 4 feet, and 2 rings shall be on one side of it, and 2 rings shall be on the other side of it. And you shall make poles of acacia wood, and overlay them with gold. And you shall put the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry the ark with them. The poles shall remain in the rings of the ark; they shall not be removed from it. And you shall put into the ark the testimony which I shall give to you." So he had given instructions there on how to carry it. Also, in Numbers chapter 7, verse 9, we read, "But he did not give any to the sons of Kohath, because theirs was the service of the holy objects which they carried on their shoulders." So here they were to place these poles on each side of the Ark of the Covenant, that is specifically the Kohathites, were to carry the holy things that were in the tent of meeting, and they were not to touch them or they would die. And excuse me, and you see this in Numbers, the 4th chapter and 15th verse. And the instructions are very specific. Well, first, can't touch this, but specifically, touch these things and you will die. This would be a way of making sure that they understood the holiness of God, and to maintain reverence for and a fear of him, a respect for who he is as holy God. David in 1 Samuel 6:1, David took men with him to carry the ark. Now it says in chapter 6, 1 Samuel, verse 1, it says, "Now the ark of the Lord had been in the country of the Philistines 7 months." So they were bringing the ark back from the Philistines. "And the men of Kiriath Jearim came and took the ark of the Lord and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill, and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Lord. And it came about from that day that the ark remained at Kiriath Jearim that the time was long, for it was 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Lord. So um, David took the men to carry the ark, but did not allow for the Levites to bring it. They were the only ones specifically to carry the ark. And because that's not the way God had designed it to be. It was the Levites who were to carry it. And then he had them to put it on a new cart. It says here in chapter 6 of 2 Samuel, in verse 3, they placed the ark of God on a new cart that they might bring it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, and Uzzah and Ahio, the sons of Abinadab, were leading the new cart. So it was a new cart. But the ark was to be carried upon the shoulders of the Levites with the poles. But there was this independent attitude, maybe, which brings about some rebellion. And so he did it his way. Maybe he forgot, which it was contrary to what God had instructed them to do. But in this, it shows a lack of reverence towards the holiness of God. God had given specific instructions on how to carry the ark and other holy things from the tent of meeting, from the tabernacle. And they didn't follow the instructions. How frustrating it is when you give someone instructions on what you want to be carried out, whatever that may be, and they kind of do it, but they don't do it the way you had specified. And so usually something happens, and sometimes disaster. Well, secondly, one could say that because the ark was in this one location for such a long time, which it says 20 years, at least 20 years, if not longer, in Abinadab's house. Again, you see that in 6:3 and then 1 Samuel 7:1 and 2, where it tells us that it was there 20 years. And his sons, Uzzah and Ahio, became accustomed to it. And so maybe the sense of holiness and the reverence was lost. They became used to seeing it. Maybe it was just kind of blended in. I mean, the house was being blessed, but it was there. And, time goes by, and you're used to something, and you don't really notice it. And sometimes we're that way with one another. We take each other for granted. We take God for granted. So maybe that's what they did. Maybe that's what happened. Well, the ark did not fall off of the cart. The oxen stumbled, and the ark appeared that it was going to fall off. So Uzzah felt that it was his responsibility at that moment to rescue the ark, or maybe it was just a reaction. Perhaps it was just a reaction. Sometimes we do that ourselves. We don't think, and before you know it, we're into something. Sometimes we think that we're going to do it our way. Maybe we can do for God what perhaps He wouldn't do, or maybe we think it's our job to do something without first seeking God's answer, or perhaps we know what He says, but we're going to go ahead and do it our way anyway. Or maybe it was just, as I said, negligence, forgetfulness, a spontaneous reaction. But it wouldn't happened had they followed God's instructions. Moses is another good example. He did not enter the promised land. Why? Because he thought that he was going to do it his way. You remember, perhaps, in Numbers chapter 20. Chapter 20 of Numbers, and verses 7 through about 12. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the rod, and you and your brother Aaron assemble the congregation and speak to the rock before their eyes, that it may yield its water. You shall thus bring forth water for them out of the rock, and let the congregation and their beasts drink. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord, just as he had commanded him. So he's done a portion of it. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly before the rock, and he said to them, Listen now, you rebels, shall we bring forth water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted up his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came forth abundantly, and the congregation and their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, Because you have not believed me, to treat me as holy in the sight of the sons of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given to them. So Moses did not listen. He did not follow the Lord's instructions. He did not speak to the rock, but he struck it. Not only did he strike it once, but he struck it twice. And the Lord said, Because you've done this, you will not go into the promised land. You will go to the edge of the land, but you will not go in. When someone gives you or I instructions on how to do something, and you could be giving that to your child, but maybe someone's giving you instructions or have given, maybe it's a teacher, a boss, a parent. When they've given us instructions, to follow the instructions, and especially if God has given us what and how to follow, we ought to follow it. He is a loving God, but he is a holy God. And like Uzzah and his brother Ahio, we have to ask ourselves, have we become too accustomed, too comfortable with God? Are we too casual with or towards him? Like the Ark of the Covenant was there for 20 years or more, it become maybe like a piece of furniture. Maybe they passed it by every day, and they've taken it for granted. Even their house was being blessed, but they're taking it for granted. God's blessing you. He loves you. He's a holy God. He's our friend, but he's our God. And sometimes we treat him as only just a friend. And we show little or no reverence toward him. Are we too casual towards him? Well, he is worthy of reverence and respect, and he should be approached in that way. And if we fail to follow him as such, we not only deserve, but we should also expect the consequences for our disobedience. So when we read this passage, we at first glance we say, wow, that's pretty severe. Well, he's a holy God, and he gives us instructions on how to live our lives. He doesn't, he doesn't force us, but when we come to him, we have to remember who he is. So it's that way in our lives with people we know and those in authority, and maybe we've just grown too accustomed to them and treat them in a casual way. So it goes through our lives and instructs us in many areas on how we ought to behave and respond to others. So Lord bless you, and we're going to next week. We're going to be back in Antioch in our prayer services in the building, and so I'm looking forward to that. I don't know that we'll be doing all of these videos, but occasionally we will. So Lord bless you, and we'll see you later.